Welcome to today's broadcast. I'm Dr. Steve Hotze, and it's a privilege for me today to interview our Texas Railroad Commissioner, Wayne Christian. Now, Wayne is from East Texas, Center Texas, as a matter of fact. He served as a state representative from 1996 to 2016, and then he ran for railroad commissioner. And we're going to talk about what the Railroad Commission does. Most people think it handles railroads, but it doesn't. It has to do with oil and gas, and we'll discuss that in a minute. Wayne was a leader of the conservative coalition when he was in the state legislature as a state representative. He had the most conservative voting record of any of the state legislators for a period of somewhere pushing 20 years. And he was a real leader. He was, as a matter of fact, he's the first Republican to be elected in East Texas since the Civil War, the war between the states. And he was reelected for 20 years after that. And then, of course, he won statewide Texas Railroad Commissioner. And so, Commissioner, we're glad to have you on the program today. Thanks for joining us.
Dr. Hotze, it's an honor to have the invitation from you. You're, may I say, in the conservative work, you've worked as a leader like few others in the state of Texas. And of course, when you affect things in Texas, Texas has enough influence and it affects the world. And thank you for having the courage to stand up when few independent businessmen will take the risk. You've been there. And so God bless you for what you've done. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, sir, for that. And there's very kind of you. Thank you for the kind remarks. And it's just like you, I feel we have a duty and responsibility as Christians to try to impact our society and bring about godly values in our society and fight off all this wokeness. And you've been a true leader in that and continue to do that. So explain to our listening audience what the Railroad Commission does, how it functions, and what you're in charge of as a railroad commissioner.
Yes, Dr. Hotze, the Railroad Commission is one of 6 statewide elected offices that have commissions. You have the Ag Commission, you have the Land Commissioner, you have the Railroad Commissioner, you have the Comptroller, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, one of 6 statewide offices. There's 3 of us at the commission. We are the only constitutionally established commission in the state. I guess the forefathers, or at least the people back earlier, were wise enough not to trust any one group with what we are in control of. So we have to have 3 of us to agree on something, or at least 2 of us to make any decisions. So, and the reason is, the danger I feel is people are not aware that the Railroad Commission, as you've already mentioned, has nothing to do with railroads anymore. It's oil, gas, and coal. We are the top regulator for fossil fuels, for oil and gas in the free world. If Texas were a state, we would be number 3 in the world in oil production and number 4 in natural gas production as a nation. We're about 50% of the oil production, about 40% of the natural gas production in the United States. So God has gifted Texas like no other place on planet Earth with his natural resources. So I feel that is a responsibility we have at the Railroad Commission to stand up for that. And I think the more people that are aware of that, the better people are prepared to understand what God has given us as oil, gas, and coal and other minerals in the state of Texas.
Well, you know, you've been fighting the push by the environmentalists and the greenies who want to get rid of oil and gas production. And Texas, you said, produces in the United States 50% of the oil and 40% of the natural gas.
Approximately so, yes. It kind of varies from time to time.
But somewhere in that neighborhood, ballpark.
Yeah, in that neighborhood. And, yeah, we are in control.
And why don't you explain to our listening audience what products besides gasoline come from the oil industry and from the natural gas industry here in Texas?
Well, that is, I think, a very important part, Dr. Hotze. The people always hear, well, if we drill, baby, drill, which I love the president's stance. I'm a real supporter. He's a hero and his administration hero, but we can get into that later. But oil and gas, you hear it a lot of times, well, if the price of oil comes down, our gasoline price goes down. And that helps for transportation, delivery. Yes, it does. But what people don't consider is gasoline is just one product. 97% of consumer products come from oil and gas. Think of that, 97. You're talking about all the plastics for your particular need as a physician. It's all of the medical chemicals for medicine that we enjoy that God's given us. Comes a lot of it from oil and gas. And you're looking at fertilizer for food. You've got to have fertilizer. Every country that has natural gas is ammonia, which is a fertilizer, and that's how you grow food and feed people on this planet. And so you're talking clothing. The tables we're sitting at are usually put together with some type of chemical. The concrete, the asphalt on the highways. Again, back off. It's 97% of consumer products. Good example people can easily look at are these wonderful pictures of the early 1900s of any city in the state of Texas. And if you see those photographs, you'll see horses and buggies around the town square, no air conditioning or heating whatsoever of any kind unless it's burning wood. But you see all these dirt roads, horse and buggies around the biggest of our cities. And you look and say, what's the difference in that picture and now? And the largest single contributor to the difference of being back in horse and buggy days is oil, gas, and coal.
Well, and that's an important point, and I want to underscore this. This has been a tremendous boon for public health. If you can imagine, in the old days, before we had cars and before we had oil and gas to be able to operate the cars, we had horse and buggies. And of course, they were in the streets, and you know what horses do. They defecate in the streets, and that gets flies, and they urinate in the streets. And you can imagine how filthy the streets were, 150 years ago. It was terrible. And so a lot of diseases occurred because the flies transmitted the various diseases from the stools that were left in the road. And you can imagine it must have stank to high heavens. But it wasn't until we got automobiles and we had gasoline to drive automobiles that we had a tremendous boon in public health. It improved dramatically just for the reasons I've spoken about. So cars, as much as some of the greenies don't like cars or they want electric cars, it was cars, gas-operated cars, that allowed America really to develop good public health. And then we got, indoor plumbing and all that went along with it. So that was that's a key point that you made about the difference between then and now in our country.
Yes. And look at the rest of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Look at a third of the world today, Dr. Hotze, does not have electricity that would power a refrigerator in America. 1/3 of the population of 8 billion people. Half of that 3 billion that don't have enough electricity have zero electricity. And so you see on planet Earth, the number one source of energy is number one, wood, number two, cow manure, or animal manure. That's in the present day world. And so I think God's going to hold some of us very guilty for the arrogance we have of saying, well, let's cut back on this, cut back on that to make a cleaner environment. When you have people that are literally starving to death, dying, that don't have medicine, don't have warmth, and go back to like you mentioned, 100 years, 150 years in America. When my grandparents were raising, there were a lot of people that passed away during the winter because if you were elderly, frail, or very, very young, sometimes you couldn't heat the house up enough in parts of this country. People would freeze. And so what cured that, what made not only the medical advances that you've been a part of, but also just the idea that we have the energy to heat, clean, and make things better. So you make a great point. Well,
talk to us about this whole philosophy of net zero carbon dioxide and, trying to cut down on carbon dioxide in the environment. Give us your position on that. Because the point I want to, first, let me just make this point. As you know, if you took biology, folks, in high school, you know that human beings breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. All the plant and all the vegetation in the world breathes in carbon dioxide and breathes out oxygen. That's how we get our oxygen, and we have got to have carbon dioxide for the plants to have photosynthesis. So I'm going to let you go from there.
Well, President Trump has quoted infamously He is fighting the Green New Scam. The carbon dioxide is part of that green scam. It's absolutely, as you mentioned, if you want to see what carbon dioxide is, it's a great fertilizer.
Right.
And if you go into greenhouses anywhere to raise plants, what do they put in there? They pipe in carbon dioxide.
Exactly.
You're sitting here, it is chemically is proven that. Now you've had the EPA come out and declare that carbon dioxide is not a threat to the environment. You look at just science, a congressional delegation. I remember at a congressional hearing, one guy put in that carbon dioxide in the environment is like, of the entire atmosphere of the world, carbon dioxide is 0.004% of the environment. You ask the second question, how much of that 0.004% is man-made? And it's 3 to 6% of 0.004. Now, Dr. Hotze, I apologize. I know you're a sophisticated physician and most eloquent in what you say, a great Christian man. But the example I came up from East Texas, it's like a grasshopper farting in a hurricane, okay? It would make no difference the carbon dioxide man makes to this environment. So it would be a joke were it not real. But then, and you look at the last 10 to 15 years, we've had a higher temperature and more carbon dioxide created in the world. And so all of a sudden we've had the largest greening in recorded history of the planet the last decade and a half.
Right.
We literally have greening, more plants,
they picked that up on the satellites, pick up how the world is greened up over the last 10, 15, 20 years.
So we benefited from this higher temperature. Do you know the longest lifespan on planet Earth, when people talk about global warming and what a threat is? The longest lifespan is along the equator. The equator is the tropical and along the highest temperatures almost on the planet along the equator. But life is longer there. If you look historically and fact-wise, when people die, it's when they freeze to death in cold environments.
Right.
That's why Dr. Hotze, one of the quotes that I'm proud of, that's a right-wing kind of a comment, Bloomberg magazine quoted me. It said, a Texas answer to global warming, quote, turn up the air conditioner, Railroad Commissioner Wayne Christian. And I think I'm proud of that one, because that's what oil, gas, and coal has done, and the technology by the industry has saved human lives, the 97% of consumer products. When people are hurting for heat, literally put on the people that freeze, the people in 1/3 of the world that don't have heat, and people freeze. Because of oil, gas, and coal. And so it's amazing, as you asked originally, why the CO2 is. The other part of the CO2 is, why are we experiencing that? And may I say, it's because of the money. Follow the money. And we have a plant by one of our major oil and gas companies. I remember before the last election down in Houston, Texas, your home, in a hotel where you may have attended. Donald Trump was having a fundraiser there in Houston a couple of months before the general election. And the chairman of Exxon and the chairman of Occidental met with him there, or just was there at the event, and asked, this is Wall Street Journal, not Wayne talking, Wall Street Journal article, said, Mr. Trump, please don't do away with the Inflation Reduction Act because we are enjoying too much economic gain. Now, these are $2 billion companies. Let me give you a quick example. Occidental in Midland, Texas, built a plant paid for by the taxpayer, grant from the Biden administration, so built the plant to capture carbon. For putting it in the ground, they get carbon credits, okay? So here we taxpayers are giving credit benefit to capture carbon out of there, carbon dioxide, which is no threat by the EPA rule right now. But we're paying Occidental money to take it out of the air, stick it in the ground, and we paid for the carbon. We taxpayers are. Now they're going to build more of those plants across Texas. Why? Because they get tax breaks for it. So understand, let's take Midland. Midland, Texas is quite dry, needs water, needs moisture. If you've ever been there, it's flat and dry. They really need to take away the fertilizer of carbon dioxide, which would give them more greenery in that town. Number two, they're having earthquakes in Midland area, and we at the Railroad Commission fight that by withdrawing the distribution or injection of different liquids regularly out there to make it safer. Occidental's already got the permit from the feds to stick carbon dioxide in the ground out there, and they went back and asked to increase the pressure. So here you got Midland, Texas, where they're having earthquakes, that got Occidental getting paid by me and you, the taxpayer, to stick a good fertilizer in the ground and potentially disturb the seismic activity out there. It's insanity.
Well, as you mentioned, and listeners, you should know this, if something seems totally unreasonable, my dad always said, or inexplicable, while somebody's doing something, there's always a money trail. And so they pass bills in Congress that allows companies like Occidental Petroleum and Exxon and others to be able to get carbon credits if they take carbon dioxide out of the environment, which we have shown clearly is needed for photosynthesis in all plants. We need that carbon dioxide. And human carbon dioxide, the production of human, is minuscule, what humans produce in carbon dioxide. And so what these large companies do, then get these fabulous amounts of money from the federal government. They build the plants, the government underwrites the plants, then they get credits, tax credits, and money for doing that. And there's no reason they're not going to just go build them all over the whole state of Texas, and wherever there's oil and gas, they're going to be doing this. And that's probably in their game plan, I would think. What is Trump doing about that?
Well, Trump has stated directly that he is opposed to the Green New Scam. But the trouble I'm having is they just had I talked with a representative from Louisiana, a state representative from Louisiana yesterday, and they just held a conference up there for many state legislators and others. And Doug Burgum, the Department of Interior Secretary and the leader of the energy movement up there, Commissioner Wright, Zedlin, are doing fabulous works up there. I love what they're saying, what they're doing, and passing rules. However, they continually told the people from the governments of Louisiana and other states that they were okay with the carbon credit system. They were okay with the carbon sequestration. And so let me give you an example how there's the Trump administration, who I support, is not being clear on this. Occidental, I just mentioned to you, they are the ones, the Trump administration, that issued the permit for them to get the carbon credits and inject into the ground the carbon dioxide. And yet they also, Exxon did the same thing in Beaumont. Who was at his fundraiser in Houston 2 months before the election asking for help? Exxon and Occidental. Now, I'm not saying that's a direct chain, but it darn sure is according to the Wall Street Journal. But here, these big corporations are being handed by the Trump administration's exceptions to inject this. At the same time, they say, okay, we're going to move that permit process back to the states. Why did they give those two companies permits if they're saying we want to give it to the states? So that's an unclear path. And again, I support the president's administration. I support the commissioner. They're doing great things, but that's where the money sometimes talks above what actually happens out here in the free world. And I think we need to fight it. I'm trying to.
Well, and I appreciate the leadership you're providing on that. As a matter of fact, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, the governor has appointed you to be a special representative from the state of Texas to what did he appoint you to the
Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission. And it's 37 states in America that produce oil and gas. And I was on there. I was Governor Doug Burgum, who is now the Department of Interior head man in Washington, was the chairman, and I served as vice chairman.
Right.
So I have a relationship with Governor Burgum, I call him. He's now Secretary Burgum, and we worked together on that. So it was a great opportunity. I've also been asked to be on the board of the U.S. Oil and Gas Association, just asked to be that. That is the top 100-plus-year-old federal organization in the United States that supersedes oil and gas. And so I'm really honored to serve on that board, upcoming of the U.S. Oil and Gas Association. So good Lord's given me some opportunities, and sadly, I'm the loud mouth on this situation in some places, but maybe God's gift was my loud mouth on some situations.
We need, I mean, that's why we're proud to have you up here, because we know of your commitment to faith, family, and freedom, and that would be free enterprise. And your commitment to that and your stand for that over your lifetime speaks for itself.
Well, I appreciate that, Dr. Hotze, and I do believe that oil and gas and coal are God's gift to Texas. I mean, this is God's creation. And that we live in a state, Dr. Hotze, that has half of the supply of the free world, almost, is the state of Texas. It's to me, it's unbelievable that at 3 different times in history, you've heard me give this example. World War I, we got a letter from the European Commonwealth after World War I saying the fuel we sent from Ranger Field in Eastland County was a wave of oil that helped win World War I. Then World War II, Big Inch and Little Inch pipeline out of Kilgore, Texas, fed 80% of the oil and gas to our forces in World War II. Winston Churchill's quote after World War II was, "It was a sea of oil from East Texas that won World War II." And here we are at this time in history when we're under attack. As you're well aware, there's people out there that don't like us, China, Russia, name the forces. The World Economic Forum, as far as I'm concerned,
right,
is an enemy of the United States, the United Nations. I mean, they don't like America, and they don't. And yet the power that Donald Trump now is using is American energy and the economy of the United States. He's able to use that right now as he puts, at this point, 6 wars down in less than 6 months. Now he's working on 7 wars. And what has done this? God's gift of oil and gas energy that he can economically negotiate and pressure these countries rather than use the lives of our boys and girls in the military. Well, that is God's gift. Texas gives the world today.
And that's so important. That's what I admire about Trump, too. He wants to get us out of trying to get all these wars that are started by the industrial military complex to make money, and our boys are sacrificed over there. Send them over to go to war so they can make money. We're in a war in Afghanistan. What were we in it? 20 years? Come on.
Yep.
It was just making a fortune. It was just a slush fund for all these politicians. And I don't know if we ought to even go into that, but we can broach that subject.
Let me broach this very, very. You made that excellent example. And while people are listening to what you just said, let's bring that home. We sit here and condemn the world, and how dare the World Economic Forum, how dare these industrial complex force our boys to give their lives. And yet when we go on to this carbon capture situation, when you talk about wind and solar being ineffective, destructive to the environment, frankly, because you can't get rid of the blades and the facilities, all of these negative things that harm our oil and gas production in America, which is the gift God gave us, guess what? They will come to a local community in the state of Texas, and some county judge will go to the congressman or their state rep or their governor and say, "Oh, approve this windmill program in our county. Oh, approve this carbon capture business in our county," because guess what? It's money to our local county. So then we have local people who sit and listen to you and I say, yeah, this is bad that the world is doing this and that the government and this industrial complex has done this. But when they look in the mirror, they better watch at who's asking for it in their local community. And frankly, it's a lot of our good friends that are sitting there asking for this government dole out. And they don't realize the government doesn't create money. They collect it from us. And now they're literally using our grandkids' money to hand out to these major corporations to put jobs, they call it, in our local communities.
Well, let's talk a little bit about wind energy and these windmills that they put all over the country, as well as the solar panels, which are, tell us how those are financed. Who benefits from that? And I'm not talking, tell about the companies, where these companies get their money to be able to produce and build all these windmills and solar panels that they cover acres and thousands of acres with.
Just like the carbon capture facilities, it's government dollars, my and your money from Washington and from Texas. Let me tell you, Texas Public Policy did a report, and it said in the last 30 years, Texas has spent somewhere around $30 billion, with a B on it, dollars for wind and solar energy in the state of Texas. Now, that's just electricity, one product. Remember, we said that's only one of 97% of products. Just on one product, energy, electricity, we have imported, and guess who's gotten that $30 billion from Texas taxpayers?
Who?
Red China. We sit here and give Red China money in Texas to bring home to Texas windmills and solar panels and batteries. Then we give them local tax abatements, these companies, as local communities, to come and put those things in our communities. And are they effective? Let's go back to Hurricane Ike. Okay, let's go back. Was Ike or Uri? Hurricane Uri, where we did without electricity for about this. It was just, but anyhow, we did without electricity in the state, and it proved during that time wind and solar went to 0 and 5%. Texas was saved by 80% of available energy was from natural gas to create electricity. Yet, what does that say? And Einstein says if you keep doing something the same way, thinking you'll do something different, you're an idiot, you're crazy, whatever. What have we done in those years since that storm? We have not built one new natural gas generating facility. We've not built one nuclear. In fact, we've retired coal and lignite. But guess what? During that time since that storm, where we proved wind and solar can't do it, Texas not only is number one in the nation in wind energy production, windmills, but we became this past summer, a year ago, the number one state in the nation on solar panels. So guess what? We have increased unreliable energy. I was honored after the storm, Uri, be quoted in the Wall Street Journal. And my comment in the Wall Street Journal was headlined, "We have proved in Texas that we have put so much money into unreliable energy, we let the pilot light go out on reliable energy."
Right.
And yet 5, 6 years later, however long, we now are experiencing potential rolling blackouts because we've increased population in the state from New York, California, and elsewhere, over 1,000 people a day. So this increased demand is up. And yet the supply of reliable energy is down. We've not increased it. And so what are we experiencing? Rolling blackouts.
Well, let me ask you, are the companies that are putting in the windmills and the solar panels, are these, I know we're buying the product from China. So China is benefiting tremendously from all our money. We're buying these goods from China. They don't, what percent of energy does solar and wind produce in Texas?
In Texas, I think it's 20%, something to 30%, 30, 40% when the sun shines and when the wind blows.
Right.
That's their maximum capacity. And only, by the way, only the wind and solar industry can use the word capacity. Okay? That's very different. You can't say that by rule of law with oil and gas. Why? Because capacity is when it's at the maximum production. So when you hear a windmill facility go in or a solar facility, they'll say, "Oh, we can heat or cool 2,500 homes." That's at maximum capacity. You know how often maximum capacity is reached? 40% of the time maximum. So they can even legally present wrong. Okay? Dr. Hotze, I think one great example I use of how wind electricity versus oil and gas. You take one windmill will last 10 years, 8 years sometimes. The president says 8 years. I say 10 years. I'm generous. 10 to 15 years a windmill will last, okay, maximum. It takes $1.25 million to take the thing down. The land around it has the concrete base in it that's heavier than the windmill that was standing up. That never goes away. There's nowhere to dispose of the blades. And this is infamous. The fiberglass there is absolutely, there's nowhere to put it. So it destroys the environment of where to put it. So that's $1.25 million for 10 to 15 years. Let's take an oil well. Oil well's life is about 50 to 70 years, one oil derrick. And to take it down is about $25,000, $30,000. Now just get this, 70 years of maximum reliable 24/7 production of energy versus 10 to 15 years at $1.25 million for unreliable energy. It's just, the logic in this is crazy. And as Einstein said, if you keep doing the same thing over thinking you'll get a different result, you're an idiot. Texas, sadly, on energy, many of our policies are idiotic.
Okay, well, why can't the Texas Railroad Commission do something about that?
Well, number one, we are not electricity. Number two, the legislature makes the rules long term. And let me tell you what our legislature did this year. And they did lots of good things, not bad mouthing the legislature, but let's take on energy. We had one bill that Kevin Sparks, senator from Midland, Odessa area, and Jared Patterson from Dallas-Fort Worth area, had a bill that was supported by a lot of Republicans, but it simply said right now, many of the 10 times the tax privileges that wind and solar have over oil and gas. One is that when wind and solar and oil and gas promised ERCOT that they're going to produce so much electricity 24/7. Well, if oil and gas producers, gas or nuclear doesn't meet that production level, there are significant fines and penalties those companies incur that they didn't put out there when they promised ERCOT they would. Guess what? Wind and solar don't. They're exempt. So when the wind doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, no penalty to wind and solar. But oil and gas, gas and nuclear, hey, big penalties. So they had a bill that said, everybody, same deal. If there's going to be penalty, if these wind and solar are going to promise this stuff, it's not on capacity, it's on historical what they produce. They can get the figures, and they promise that amount of electricity. But guess what? The Republican-dominated legislature in Texas voted that down. Why? Because a lot of our state representatives and senators had their local communities, Texas voters, say, we want the money. Bring us more wind and solar. So follow the money, Dr. Hotze.
So again, is the money coming from the state of Texas coffers, or is it coming from the federal government, or both?
Both, and local communities. Understand there are tax abatement these counties or communities give these wind farms and solar panels to locate in their particular areas. So the local taxpayer winds up sacrificing future taxes because they give them tax privileges to come in and say, we won't charge you taxes for the first 5 years or something like that. So that's tax money that doesn't come. That's just as bad as money that goes out. So those people lose tax money at the local community. The state does some, indeed the $30 billion Texas Public Policy said to buy the things and get them over here. And then the feds pay the other 50 to 60% of it. So it's taxpayer. Bob McEwen has a great statement, because you and I keep batting this around. I think it's good for people to understand. There's first party money, second party money, and third party money. First party money, if it's my money and I'm going to use whatever it is I'm buying, I'm concerned about the price and I'm concerned about the quality and quantity. Then there's second party money. That means I use my money, but I'm not going to directly use the product. So I'm going to buy Aunt Sadie a Christmas present and it's a purple sweater that was on sale. I'm not really going to use it, but Aunt Sadie's happy with it. Fine. Okay. There's third party money. Third party money where it's not my money, so I don't care what the price is, and I'm not directly going to use it, so I don't care what the quality, quantity, or the waste is. Every government purchase is a third party purchase. It ain't my money, so as the legislator of the government entity, it ain't gonna come out of my family's pocket, so I'm not quite as interested. And the other part is what I'm buying, I'm not directly going to use it as much, so I'm not as concerned about the quantity and quality. And that's the mess we're in. We're using third-party money, which is mine, your tax dollars, with people that don't care what the price is and don't care what the end result is, because it doesn't affect them directly.
Well, tell me this. The people that set up these companies to produce the electricity from the windmills and from solar panels, these companies then sell it they sell that electricity to the grid, right?
Yes.
That's how they make their money. And they literally don't have to, when they set up a company, they don't have to purchase the windmills. They get a grant from the government. The government underwrites the windmills, and then is it a public-private agreement that they have?
Different contracts, but mostly I would think, and again, the Railroad Commission is not into electricity, so right. I'm kind of out of my pocket on this, but it's a joint partnership. But let's take, for example, what they normally do. About 80% is government paid. So for a 20% investment, the company is going to build this stuff, say, or 30%, say 70%. What a great deal. If somebody else is going to pay for half to 3/4 of what you're building out here to start with, you're already ahead of the game for anybody else. And that's exactly what happened. Then we're going to pay them tax dollars to capture whatever it is and do with it. So the whole thing, and wind and solar are exempted from the Endangered Species Act. Thus, if oil and gas were to kill one snail pop darter or anything, or a prairie chicken or whatever, man, there's heck to pay in court cases and fines. But guess who? And Trump has said this. They kill hundreds of bald eagles daily with windmills and solar panels. They're exempt from endangered species law. Texas Parks and Wildlife, secondly, was telling me they're exempt from a lot of other laws, but if you take a windmill or solar panel field that they talk about, they're saving the environment. At this point, when they take those fields down and do away with the wind and solar fields in the future, at this point, because they are exempt from what type chemicals are used to clean those things and lubricate those things, where if oil and gas, we have to be careful to the environment, what chemicals we use. They're exempt in wind and solar. So not only do they kill all the animals, lizards and everything else out there, and no trouble with the wind and solar folks, whereas oil and gas would be burnt with lawsuits. Also, you're looking at that part too that's exempt, which is the Endangered Species Act, and the land the Texas Parks and Wildlife says is not going to be usable for agriculture or any other reasonable use for at least 100 years.
Yeah.
So what's friendly to the environment? You're destroying property for use in the future for 100 years, and that's being environmentally responsible?
Well, if we follow the money, this is the way I see it happens. So somebody comes up with the idea that we're going to set up a company and we're going to put up windmills, okay? Go to the government. They set up their company. Go to the government. The government says, great, we're going to give you 80% of it and underwrite it. And you're going to put in 20%. Well, that's cash to them. Now, on the backside of that, these business people that are setting up these solar panel fields and the windmill fields, they get this cash in. Then they hire lobbyists. And the lobbyists work the legislature with the cash that they got from the government. They're not using every last penny of it to build the field. They're getting cash. That money goes back to lobbyists, to lobby the legislators to make sure that they have all these added benefits and tax abatements. Plus, the individuals that own these companies donate to their politicians so they can get them to pass legislation. That's just the way it's a quid pro quo. And
Dr. Hotze, you've bypassed me for 8 years. It took me about 5 or 6 years to figure this out, and you got it in 10 minutes here. Let me tell you what it is. And this is the sad thing that's happening in the state of Texas. Our friends in the legislature have a lot of problems. You know that. Right. Medical problems, border, all types of things. And they can't be an expert in everything. And you mentioned just then, our tax dollars from these major corporations are hiring lobbyists, okay? Good folks, and should be listened to. They're part of the view, some of these oil and gas big corporations.
Right.
Their view is one view. But much of our policy in Texas, energy policy, which is the number one producer of energy in the United States, our policy is not being made for benefit of Texas citizens. Just stop and think of that phase. Much of the energy policy being made by our Texas legislature is not necessarily for the benefit of Texas citizens. Why? The lobbyists you've mentioned are bought and paid for by the big corporations. The big corporations don't benefit or work for the customer. They work for their shareholder, right?
Right.
And they'll tell you that directly. So if they're working for their shareholder, the majority of their shareholders are not citizens of the state of Texas. So I come back, if we're making policies by the lobbyists from our major oil and gas companies and energy companies who are not representative of the citizens of the state of Texas, then, dear legislative friend of mine, we're not making energy policy in this state for the benefit or the well-being of the citizens of the state of Texas. And that's something our legislators, I think, need to wake up to.
Well, that's a very critical and important point. So, listeners, I hope that you have got a better understanding about the problems with net zero carbon emissions, the importance of CO2, the way corporations are able to, through lobbyists, get legislatures to pass legislation that would enable them to be able to get free money from the government and also tax abatement so they don't have to pay any taxes and really make a killing on trying to promote this whole idea of carbon capture, which we know is I'll just say what President Trump said and what you said. It's the green scam that they're pushing upon America, and we've got it at the Paris Climate Control, and thank goodness we've got Trump up there blocking this as much as possible. And thank God that we have our Commissioner Wayne Christian on the Texas Railroad Commission, which governs oil and gas in the state of Texas. And he's a leader not only in Texas is the leading producer of oil in the country, the third largest producer of oil and gas in the world. And Wayne Christian, our railroad commissioner, is the leading conservative spokesman to protect the oil and gas industry in Texas. And he deserves your support. He has my support. And I just want to tell you, Commissioner, how much we appreciate your leadership.
Dr. Hotze, I'm humbled because I respect your leadership equally. And thank you for the good work that you've done for the good Lord in this state.
Well, thank you, sir. And it was a pleasure to have you today. And thank each one of you for joining us. Have a great day, and God bless you.